So now we're going to talk about how to finish your serger tails once you've finished your practicum and on any seam that you serge for a project. So when you finish your practicum, you should have 3 thread tails that have to be finished. So I think it's easiest if you do all your serging and then come back to the tails at the end. This one is the corner repivoted, so it doesn't have a tail that needs to be finished. So there's 3 different ways we can finish a thread tail. So on your practicum, you're going to do one method on each tail that you're going to finish. So the first one is using this bottle of Fray Check. So this is located in a classroom underneath the bulletin board. I'll point that out to you in the lab. Make sure you don't mix this up with sewing machine oil because they are very different things. So this says Dritz Fray Check on it, and it stops fraying and also finishes our buttonholes and our serging. So now just put a little bit of Fray Check, just about a drop over the end of your stitching right here on the fabric. And I like to put just a little bit on both sides. And then that takes a few minutes to dry, so you'll have to leave that before you cut off your thread tail. And you'll notice that it looks like maybe it's discolored your fabric a little bit. It will dry clear, but sometimes you can still feel it. It leaves like a little bit of a rough texture. So when we're doing apparel, like when we make our t-shirt at the end of the semester, I would not recommend using the Fray Check method because then you might have a little bit of a rough part in your seam that could be uncomfortable when you're wearing your t-shirt or other item of apparel. I also wouldn't use this in the corner on your bags because it makes the fabric stiff and hard to turn out into a square corner. So the next method we're going to use is the Tailors Knot, and we're going to do that on this tail here. So make sure when you take your serging off the machine, you always leave yourself about 4 inches to use to finish the tail. If you're going to use Fray Check, you don't have to leave as large of a tail, but for the Tailors Knot and the next method we'll do, it's really important to have a decent length of tail. So for the knot, you're just going to do an overhand knot, but the key is you want to get it as close to this edge of the fabric as possible. And try to make it look nice and neat. So you'll just make a loop, pull the thread tail through, and then pull it a little much. I don't want my knot to get tight until it's right next to my fabric right here. See how there's a knot forming, but I want to keep it nice and close. So then there is a little knot. If I'd done it perfectly, it'd be about a 1/4 inch closer. Because see, my knot's out here, and so I'd ideally like it to be about right here. So you cut on this side of the knot, because if I cut over here, it's not going to be done correctly. So this is still finished. I'd say that's still indiscreet enough that it's a fine finish, but ideally it'd be a little bit closer. And the next way to do is my favorite way of finishing the serger tails. So in the drawer under your sewing machine, you should have a small plastic bag like this that has a large-eyed needle in it, and it tells you what it's for, finishing serger tails. So you just pull it out of the paper. See, it has a pretty large eye there. So if you try to use just a regular hand needle or embroidery needle for this, it's not going to work very well. So I need to get all 4 of my threads that are in this serger tail through this eye. And sometimes that can be a little bit tricky, even though it is a large-eyed needle. My favorite way to do it is I fold this tail over it once, and then I like to pull it tight and pinch it in my fingers so it's all kind of one piece. And then you should just be able to wiggle it all through and then pull out one end. So then I have it threaded like that, just like if I was going to hand sew, but you don't have to tie a knot in the end. So then I like to put it underneath the stitches. You can go this way or you can go this way. It doesn't really matter which way you go, but make sure you start on the very edge, the last serger chain right here, and I run it under for about 5 or 6 stitches or about a 1/2 inch. You don't have to rethread this entire tail because we'll just cut off the slack. So I've got about under 4 right now. Try not to put it through the fabric, just under the stitches. Okay, so you can see there I've run it under about 5 stitches. There's the threads over my needle. I'm going to just pull it through. Pull the serger tail through, and then I try to just straighten that out before I cut it. And then I'll just cut it right here, and then we have this nice neat finish. And so it's important that we start here on the edge, because then if I was to start running my needle under like right here, I would have still loose threads over here on the corner that could cause it to come undone. So now I'm going to go back to my Fray Check. It's probably about dry, and I'll just trim that off right next to the fabric. So the 3 ways to finish your serger tails are Fray Check, Tailors Knot, or rethreading the tail with a needle. I know I went through this a little fast, so please feel free to rewatch this video and go back and review any that seemed a little bit trickier.